giving Dear Alice a hypothetical comeback since we do have things to do, Moon and Back Media, Gamma Media. I'm looking at you two specifically. I say that like they're watching my stupid little YouTube videos. But anyways, my working title for this album is the word fairs, which from my extensive research into British slang could mean anything. British choujimi viewers, if you happen to watch this, please weigh in with your thoughts. It seems to be a British slang shorthand for fair enough, and can be used to react to almost anything. It's a very quick way of acknowledging what someone has said or done, like a very neutral way to accept any kind of information. Even when the situation itself isn't actually fair, people might still use fairs as a casual marker that they've registered the information and are ready to move on. What makes fairs interesting, especially in the context of texting, is that it doesn't carry much emotional weight or detail. It doesn't deepen the conversation or convey much feeling, right? It just acknowledges that something happened. And because of that lack of substance, it often comes across as a very dry response, overly neutral, and sometimes even a little dismissive.
When life gets tough, all you gotta do is say fairs and move on. Your girl cheated on you? He was probably better looking than you. Fairs. Fairs. You take your laptop out, forgot the charger. Fairs. 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 Fairs.
And for the confused ones, if I ever say fairs to you in a conversation, it can mean one of three things. 1, I want this conversation to end. 2, I don't even know what to say. And 3, I completely disagree with everything you're saying. I don't know what you're saying, but whatever you're saying, I just don't agree.
What are you doing today? I might hit the gym today, you know? Fairs. Yeah, man, it's gonna be a good session. Fairs. You know what? I'm also gonna jump off the nearest bridge. Fairs. Wait, what? Brother, give me something. Are we not friends? Male or female? I just feel like I can't have any good conversations nowadays. I don't know if it's an intellectual gap or if people just don't want to chat to me. There's a thing called conversational threading. If I say something, I want you to feed off it. If you ask me what I'm doing, I tell you what I'm doing. You say fairs, the convo's done. I can't be bothered anymore. I'm sitting at... We need to leave these conversational killers, okay? I can't do it anymore. I need the stimulation. Maybe that's a me problem, but please.
I want to use this idea, the fact that fairs is a signal of what can be called dry texting, to outline a narrative about how men are typically very bad when it comes to communication and expressing themselves. This idea came to me while I was thinking about why Pink Panther's Fancy That works so well. It's such a simple project on the surface, short songs with very tight writing and a really cohesive emotional atmosphere. There's nothing overly narrative heavy, and yet everything feels like sincerely intentional. And I think that simplicity, when done well, can be incredibly compelling, especially for newer artists like Dear Alice. That's the same energy I want for this album. The whole concept builds off of the slang term fairs. It barely means anything, but there is something to that, right? People still say fairs because they don't know what else to say. It's communication stripped down to the bare bones, acknowledging something happened without really engaging with it. Fairs ends up becoming this weird safety net. It's a placeholder for emotions we're too lost or too insecure to be able to articulate. So even though fairs is basically empty, it still shows effort. It still means I heard you, or I understand, or I don't understand, if nothing else. That's why I think Fairs is such a powerful album title. It represents a response that says almost nothing, but still says something anyway. Our narrator could have stayed silent, but he didn't. He sent that nothing word response because he wanted to keep the conversation alive to some extent, even if he had no idea how to do that properly. This awkward and dry gesture becomes the emotional anchor of the whole album, narratively focused around topics of communication. From here, the album forms its identity. Similar to Fancy That, I don't want this album to have an overly dense plot or dramatic highs and lows. The simplicity is the point here. The songs are clean and self-contained, just a handful of fully realized moments that build to a cohesive mood. Aesthetically and conceptually, the album works towards 3 things. I'm imagining I'm in a boardroom meeting with you trying to pitch this album as if you're Moon and Back Media, so walk with me here. First of our goals, it stays short and concise. A tight track list of strong ideas leaves a sharper impression than bloated storytelling. That's especially for a group still making a first impression in their debut year. We don't need Shakespearean monologues just yet. I know that sounds rich coming from me. For this album, each song should just feel like a little snapshot of atmosphere and feeling. Second goal, and part of the reason behind this first decision, is that I want this album to walk a line between the polished, slightly impersonable feel of a traditional pop music boy group and the actual texture of boyhood. Things like low-effort charm, a reckless kind of honesty, accidental vulnerability, the works. The borderline stupid energy that comes with men trying to express their feelings. Third goal, the visuals stay easygoing and casual. Everything should be lowbrow and breezy visually, while the lyrics and production reveal a narrator who's way more introspective than he lets on. I picture Fairs I'll put some pictures on the screen in this boardroom meeting. I picture Fairs leaning into the cool-toned, rainy, borderline dreary aesthetic that people I think instinctively associate with British city life. Not in an exaggerated or comical way, I just want it to be subtly there. Just the grey skies in the background, right? It's the kind of dreary weather you grow up with and don't even question because it's always been there. And for the 5 members of dearALICE, British as they are, that is the environment they've known their whole lives. I think there could be something interesting about how that atmosphere may shape people, or just metaphorically represent this emotional dynamic. It all contributes to a culture where emotions get softened and left unspoken. You learn to keep things to yourself and stay understated in a lot of ways. That's the visual influence I want running underneath the album. The same way the weather settles over the city, it also settles over its people. That constant backdrop of British dreariness becomes a metaphor for why these characters struggle to express themselves in the first place. There are always clouds above them. The air is too cool for comfort. The society and environments they grew up in didn't necessarily teach them to open up, so now they're using this album as a space to do that. And this brings us back to the heart of fairs. This album becomes the medium where all the things they can't articulate in real life finally get some breathing room. I want songs that are understated, concise, and shaped, like forged by atmosphere, but still, in the end, honest. Effectively, the musical version of that meaningless fairs text message, a small effort to say something real even when the words don't come easily for someone like our narrator. Okay, let's move on to the track list.
Don't call me up, are you feeling me? No doubt about what you see in me. That attitude is so mean to me.
First up is Love to Party by Avi or AV. This song is going to make up one half of our impersonable boy band moment on this album. Partying is certainly an overplayed subject in songs, but this is a string-heavy, high-stakes club song asking if the green lights he's seeing ahead of this relationship are actually trustworthy. Our narrator struggles to get a gauge of how this other person is feeling, and so the party is treated as a place where all these truths might be able to unravel a little bit easier. The subtext here, it's easier to pierce through emotional barriers in the backdrop of a party than it is in real life with all your senses about you. Our narrator doesn't identify this as a handicap just yet, that he's relying on the primal institution of partying to help his emotional endeavors. As a result, this track can function as a kind of mindless party anthem, building our overly polished, impersonable boy band persona while subtly setting the foundation for the album's core concept about communication. Quote, "Tell me, do you love to party?" is the refrain here. A nuanced way of asking the love interest to fill in the blanks for our narrator. The sweeping strings in the production add such a melodramatic edge. Our narrator boasts confidence in knowing the love interest's intentions beyond a doubt, but he soon falls into more ulterior questions about partying, inferring that he's a little more insecure than he lets on.
And I could fight forever if you just say yes. Who's best off with you?
Next song is Yes, originally by, I think the artist's name is pronounced Minjae. This song presents us with a slightly more subdued pop vocal performance that feels unknowingly conflicted between confidence and outright emotional collapse. The smooth clarity of the mix here gives every phrase a similar sense of urgency to the previous track's string sections. Our narrator here is kind of trying to hold himself together as the emotion in his voice starts to betray him. The chorus lands with a heavy punch, unfiltered but built to emphasize the single word he can't stop repeating. Quote, "I can give you everything, just say yes." The production puts the vulnerability of our narrator on a more obvious display. I think that's unintentionally in a lot of ways. Lyrically, the song is the internal monologue of someone who is ready to give everything, but is terrified of giving it to no one, and there is a sort of elephant in the room that's currently going unaddressed. The narrator keeps circling the idea of devotion, quote, "I'll give you everything," but immediately pulls back into the fear resting underneath that statement. It's the dread of seeing the person he loves choose someone else. The hook, quote, "Just say yes," is more of an emotional shield than our narrator may give credit to. Very plainly, he's asking for certainty because certainty is the only way he can justify letting himself feel anything at all. This fixation on direct or explicit confirmation before he expresses how he feels reveals a deeper anxiety. He doesn't trust that his own feelings are valid unless they're reciprocated in unmistakable terms, right? So yes becomes a more obvious or more direct moment of this emotional bottleneck. It shows a narrator who wants connection but can't bring himself to initiate it without being guaranteed safe passage. Instead of expressing how he feels directly, he kind of bargains around it, asking for signs, because the idea of wasted vulnerability feels unbearable. His feelings aren't the problem here, it's his inability to lead with honesty, but obviously, our narrator isn't quite aware of that yet. Within the album's conceptual journey, the song functions as the sound of someone right on the edge of speaking plainly, speaking how they feel, but he's still incapable of doing it. This is usually where I imagine we start seeing fairs come up in conversation to stagger some of the emotional burden. Yes, as a song, I think gives voice to the fear-driven logic that often keeps men emotionally silent, the belief that feelings must be confirmed before they're expressed, and that vulnerability is only safe when someone else has already endorsed it, right? This song, to me, is a picture of love through the lens of self-protection, and hopefully works to touch on the cost of that kind of hesitation.
Burning bridges with every one of my bad decisions.
The next song, New Light, originally by Wimmy or Wymie. This song's brighter arrangement frames the emotional shift as something spontaneous, but beneath that brighter glow lies a growing awareness. It's threaded through the lyricism that he's standing in the ruins of things he set on fire, of the bridges that he has burned. The quote, new light is a new love interest in his life, but it's also metaphorically shining a light on his own patterns. The uncomfortable awakening that happens when someone makes you want to be better and kind of forces you to look honestly at the damage you've done before, right? As the narrator moves through the verses, there's a realization that these sudden feelings aren't happening in a vacuum. What feels like a new beginning exists alongside a growing sense of dread, the fear that he might repeat the same impulses that have already cost him relationships before. Instead of defaulting to blame circumstance beyond his control, he begins to see that the ash or smoke that is trailing behind him is of his own making. The song kind of hints at this through moments of hesitation and interrogation of the self, where excitement is laced with guilt and a palpable sense of self-awareness. This kind of narrative tension gives New Light a bittersweet texture, no pun intended as it relates to Dear Alice. The narrator wants to surrender to the rush of new attraction, but that attraction casts some pretty big shadows behind him that are becoming hard to ignore. For the first time, our narrator is beginning to recognize that his bridges didn't simply collapse. They were burned, often through avoidable missteps. The light he's basking in of this new potential is also revealing his responsibility. I really like that kind of duality in this song. I think it's what makes it resonate. It's the thrill of something new beginning, but colliding with the regret of what happened in the past.
Now that I'm gone, I'm out here living, doing it all, that's right, I told you so.
The next song is Told You So, originally by RC Avenue. This song hypothetically crashes into the Fairs album with an aggressively polished burst of 90s inspired pop. The production leans hard into the 90s signature palette. I'm pretty sure this song actually interpolates Hit Me Baby One More Time by Britney Spears all throughout the song, which I think is interesting because it does work to narratively respond to it. In Britney's song, the confession, quote, I shouldn't have let you go, presents a moment of remorse over miscommunication. RC Avenue's Told You So plays like the other end of that same emotional spectrum. Instead of remorse, the narrator offers swag. Like, instead of a vulnerable confession, he really only offers deflection. He isn't ready to admit the fear or desire he has. So our narrator doubles down on a performance of being untouchable or invincible. The sonic and narrative relationship to One More Time becomes, to me, a kind of commentary on how universal communication struggles really are. Britney folds inward, mourning what she failed to say. Our narrator here folds outward, disguising his inability to express himself by pretending he had control all along. I think both are manifestations of the same fear, just expressed through different emotional languages. Even more than the first song, I would say this track is the album's most boy band adjacent mask. But the narrative cracks show if you listen closely. The need to assert, quote, I told you so. It's an emotional retreat into performance. Instead of confronting his emotions honestly, he pivots into cockiness. Narratively, this song represents a kind of backslide or downward spiral for our narrator. The moment the spark from New Light becomes too real and he kind of panics. Told You So is the defensive backlash or recoil, a kind of regression of emotionality disguised as confidence. It mirrors the cycle many men fall into. When vulnerability feels too close, it feels safer to lean on performance, anything to avoid genuine expression. I think by pairing the boy band fantasy with the emotional hollowness underneath, Told You So becomes one of the album's most important turning points. It shows that communication issues are cyclical by nature, stupid at times, but in a roundabout way profoundly human. From the Ending of a Tragedy, originally by the Day 6 unit Even of Day, closes the album with the emotional weight of someone finally seeing the full scope of the damage he's caused, through the corrosive neglect of feelings that have gone unspoken for a little too long. I think the song's gentle-ish pacing and emotional ache can give the ending of the album a slow recognition that something could have survived here if he had been able to confront himself earlier. I think this song fits perfectly as the last chapter in a story about communication-averse masculinity, right? Because here the narrator finally admits that the true tragedy was not the loss of these relationships, it was his inability to let himself be known within them. The repeated sentiment of fairs, an otherwise harmless conversational filler, becomes a narrative weapon. It embodies the way he's avoided complexity all along. Whenever a moment called for deeper emotional engagement, he defaulted too many times to a non-committal word that ultimately means nothing. This makes the first line of the chorus of this song, quote, please leave me now, especially heartbreaking. It's our narrator acknowledging that he cannot be the person the other party deserves, that his inability to process or express what he feels has already poisoned the foundation of whatever this was. Within the atmospheric arc of the album, this final track is the reckoning. That chronic emotional evasion becomes indistinguishable from indifference to the person you love from the ending of a tragedy allows the album to end with some kind of clarity. It doesn't offer closure, but maybe some accountability in the end. The tragedy is self-inflicted. This is my marketing pitch for the Fair's album, We Move. Each track captures a different version of the same struggle, seeking certainty before vulnerability, running from the feelings he wants to express the most, and so on. The album is a look at a lifelong pattern of self-protection disguised as strength or masculinity. Yeah, I think staggering the emotional weight of these topics with the leading sentiment Fairs closes a strong enough conceptual loop for a debut adjacent project from this group. Thank you for watching this. If you did, let me know what you think about this. The concept, again, British choujimi viewers, please weigh in with your thoughts, any songs that you would add, and so on. I'll provide a link to a bigger Spotify playlist with similar adjacent songs in the description. Yeah, thanks again for watching this. Subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time.